This week, everything starts coming together because this week we have Mars making a sextile to Uranus, Saturn making a sextile to Uranus, and Mars making a trine to Saturn. This kind of like trifecta, like malefic energy coming together. I don't know really how to explain it, but it's funny that that these transits of Mars sextiling Uranus, Saturn sextiling Uranus, and Mars trining Saturn, they all happen on the same day this week. The way that I look at this is there's a lot of missing pieces all coming together to formulate a solution. Now, the solution might be not exactly what you want, or it might be a little uncomfortable getting to the solution, but who cares? Problem is solved by the time that we get to Friday. So let's just go ahead and get started talking about it. So welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for March 31st through April 6th of 2025. My name is Cam White. I'm a professional astrologer, and I like telling you what the hell is going on in the space and giving you a reason to blame the stars. Now, this week we also have Venus conjoining the North Node and Mercury conjoining the North Node and Venus making a trine to Mars too. So those are going to be some fun highlights. But what's really kind of important is this is our first week with Neptune in Aries. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that, and let's just talk about it. So we start Monday off with really nothing. Like the moon is just going to be in Taurus, and it's not making any aspects on Monday, but it's not void because the moon will be eventually making a sextile to Mars and so on and so forth. But Monday is our first weekday with Neptune in Aries. And so there's kind of a, like I said last week, which by the way, and we have this Neptune, like we're starting to, be in the very new waters of Neptune in Aries. My question for you is, what can you do to symbolically take action? If you are someone who is into magic of some sort, and when I say magic, not like sleight of hand magic, which is also very fun, but magic in terms of like ritualistic thinking, you can make any action that you take magical or make it, what's the word I'm looking for? Ritualistic is probably another way to look at it. You have to associate meaning with it. You have to associate a story with it. You have to associate that it's bigger than just yourself when you take this action. That's why it's like, for example, witches will if you set these crystals up in the northeast direction and you write a letter and you burn it up, this thing will happen. And those are actions that make something, true. Well, you can do that with anything. You don't have to do a whole ritual. You could just literally be like, when I step through this door, this will happen. But you have to have the actual energy and intention on it. And that's the part of doing the whole crystals and burning and seance stuff. That's, it makes it real. So I say that because on Monday, the moon's just going to be in Taurus. There's really nothing going on here. And so what I would suggest on Monday is really try to find ways to notice Neptune and Aries in your life. That depends on what house Neptune rules. By the time you're watching this, I will have my one of however many Neptune and Aries videos I do, because I'm going to have to do a lot of them. But the first one will be out, and I will be talking about how this affects your zodiac sign. But I want you to see how real it is for you. And again, what I want you to do is step out of the conscious, the unconscious space and step into the conscious body. Does that make sense? So we get to Tuesday, and on Tuesday, the moon, while it's still in Taurus, is going to make a sextile to Mars. It's going to make a sextile to Saturn, and then it's going to conjoin Uranus. Then the moon is going to sextile Venus, and then sextile Mercury. Then the moon is going to go into Gemini, and then it's going to sextile Neptune, our first lunar transit to Neptune. Then it's going to trine Pluto, and then we have our highlight for Tuesday, which is Venus, while she's still retrograde, conjoining the North Node. This is a funny week because it's literally like nothing, everything. And Tuesday is a lot of things are happening on Tuesday. Tuesday's where all the action's at. And so one of the notes I wrote down was like lunar madness. A lot of things are working out because look, it's the moon sextile Mars, sextile Saturn, conjoin Uranus, sextile Venus, sextile Mercury, sextile Neptune, trine Pluto. These aren't squares or oppositions where you're going to face a lot of tension. This is kind of like, have you ever had a day where you had like all these errands to run and you just knocked everything off your list? That's kind of what Tuesday is. As the moon sextiles Mars, look, what's important actually about Tuesday is Tuesday's almost a foreshadowing into Friday when we have all of the sextile trine stuff. But the moon making a sextile to Mars is like, all right, what is of necessity? What do I need to take care of? Get that taken care of. Sweet. Moon is in Taurus making a sextile to Saturn and Pisces. Again, there's just like developing systems and developing habits and disciplines that can help you get to where you need to go. But then the moon conjoins Uranus on Tuesday. Okay, so there is this disruption. Not everything is going to go according to plan. You can roll with it because then after the moon conjoins Uranus, the moon then sextiles Venus. So it's like, okay, have fun with it. Venus is now in Pisces, so she's exalted, but she's retrograde. but she's getting on the North Node. In fact, Venus conjoins the North Node on Tuesday. Well, let me get to that. But the moon sextiles Venus, great. And the moon sextiles Mercury, where Mercury is also retrograde, in detriment. And so there's this ability, I feel like, to like shake it off or shrug it off or be adaptable in a way that maybe you just didn't know that was like possible. But then the moon goes into Gemini, and this is where like the caffeine hits. There's a lot of stimulation, but then the moon makes a sextile to Neptune and trines Pluto. I wonder what this is about, because this is our first lunar transit to Neptune in Aries. We're going to get quite a bit of information, I think, from here on out about Neptune in Aries and what it might mean and what it might symbolize. I look at moon in Gemini sextiling Neptune in Aries as finding creative ways to take action. Because it, again, and here's the thing, I saw a comment that was like, someone's like, I don't know how to take action. And that's, again, you have to get out of your head. You have to get out of your head and into your body. It's not, so many of you, when it comes to wanting to take an action, you plan the action, you think about the action, you research the action, you ask questions about the action, you write lists about the action, you do everything but doing it. And what's fun about Neptune in Aries is you're going to see a lot of people in the world move past you. They're going to leave you behind because people are going to start experimenting. You're like, just like, again, the Neptune and Pisces stuff was so much of discovering these worlds of the unconscious and this normalization, again, of like, like, again, things like spirituality, crystals, like ayahuasca experiences. And I'm using all that stuff kind of just as analogies or just as proxies for the idea. But we're going to start seeing that with action, with war, with attacking things. And if you're confused about it now, Neptune in Aries is not going to help you. You have to understand like how to get out of your head and into your body and just go. And a lot of that involves not thinking. And so I look at the moon in Gemini sextiling Neptune in Aries is using witty information to do something. For example, if you are someone that we could call a controller. For example, I'm a controller, which means I don't do things unless it's my idea. And that is both, that serves me in a lot of ways, and it also doesn't serve me in a lot of ways. I'm very hard-headed and stubborn because of that. But if you're someone, which a lot of you are probably controllers, who, like, it's like someone tries to tell you, hey, try this. You're like, no, but then you find it on your own. You're like, I want to try this. And that person's like, I've been telling you to do that for so long. This is a really interesting day for those people who are who might discover information, or who might see a different perspective, or might have some sort of creative impulse to just try something new. That's how I look at moon in Gemini sextiling Neptune and trining Pluto. Now, there is this part of it where the moon's in Gemini. There's this focus on communication. It's going to be sextiling Neptune and trining Pluto, where there's this like, I saw this thing. I don't know if this was a national thing or a very local to this person, but this person I follow on Instagram posted like people were doing some sort of a Tesla protest or something like that. And that's all fine and dandy. But I wonder, again, just like we saw with like the George Floyd riots, what situations can kind of get out of hand with that. And again, this is where it's kind of like Pluto's in Aquarius. I'd maybe watch out for big crowds. But I look at this kind of transit as, it almost reminds me of telephone. Like something gets communicated, it's distorting people's actions, and it might rile up a crowd a little bit more. Now you could take that as an analogy for your own life, and not necessarily literally, but it is kind of interesting. Now on Tuesday we also have we have Venus, as she's retrograde, conjoining the North Node as our highlight. I mean, we're still on Tuesday. We're like 15 minutes into this shit. Okay, I almost don't even know what to say. The moon will be exalted for the most of the day. The sun is exalted. Venus is exalted. We're finally having dignity. Like, I want you to, I might do this on Instagram. There was a post that I made a couple weeks ago about how literally there was no dignity in anything. It was like the sun was in detriment, Mercury's in detriment, Venus is in detriment, versus now it's almost flipped. The sun is exalted, the moon is exalted, Venus is exalted. And yes, Mercury and Mars are still in detriment, and Jupiter is, but we're going to get out of that very soon. And I just kind of look at this as like, I wonder how good we feel here. And I also look at with Venus, if she's about desire and connecting with things, and she's retrograde, it's like there's this relearning how to do that. But now she's morning star and she's on the North Node. This is like what I kind of wrote down was like full speed ahead on like desires, full speed ahead on desire change. Sorry, sometimes I have to like really down in here, but anyway. And I really just want to know, like, what do you want? And what are you willing to do to get it? And what I mean by that is like people might say, "Oh, I'm willing to do all of these things to get it." Okay, are you willing to do the thing which is acknowledge what you have done in the past didn't work? Not do things that you think are going to work because they haven't worked in the past, but actually get out of your own way and do things. Like there's so many people that want all of this stuff, but they don't want it bad enough to realize they might be wrong, and that they may not want it bad enough that they realize that they're like they can listen to other people that have done it and actually do as they say, and not it's just one of those things of you only know so much, and at a certain point you can't like act as if like you know better on stuff. And so I say that because I would just wonder with Venus on the North Node, and there's just like really this intense feeling of like this is what I want, and Neptune being in Aries, of how does that change how we push the button, if that makes sense. Mars is still in Cancer, but Mars is really supported this week. This is like the best week of Mars out of all the since September when Mars went to Cancer. This is like the best week of Mars in Cancer that we get. So there is a lot of support with like the actions that we take and the things that we do. And so I just wonder how much of it involves having clarity around what it is that we want. And then when we have that clarity, when we have that desire, because Neptune's in Aries, do we change what we do to get there? Does that make sense? Then we get to Wednesday and the moon just conjoins Jupiter. If you ever seen the Lego movie, that movie gets stuck in my head a lot, of the Everything is Awesome song. That's it on Wednesday. Just the moon conjoining Jupiter. Everything is awesome. That's it. And I really think it comes from a place of feeling a little overwhelmed, feeling very stimulated. And the other part that I'd put it here is that during this whole time, Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini and Jupiter at the moment, is retrograde and in detriment. There is a level of there's never been a better time to just like not care about understanding things, if that makes sense. Like, and this is almost what I like about Neptune and Aries, is like sometimes you just have to do it and you don't need to know how to do it. Like you don't need more clarity, you don't need more information, you don't need to understand it. You just need to do the thing. You just need to take the action. In fact, this is actually something I talk a lot about in my courses over on my website, but also when I consult other people that want to become astrologers. Look, you need to learn like astrology in order to be an astrologer, right? And also that will just elevate your ability to interpret. But there are a bigger group of astrologers that are so much more invested into picking up a book and reading it than they are about doing consultations. And they cope and they're like, well, I need to learn more, or I want to do this. But in reality, they're just terrified of asking for business. They're terrified of asking for what they want. And so they cope with more information. But I'm going to tell you right now, you will know so much more about astrology when you do consultations, when you consult people, when you read charts. Like, and it doesn't matter if you're reading them for free, if you're reading them for money, it doesn't matter. The more charts you read, the more you're going to learn astrology. You don't even really need like when it comes to like all these books, I got these books right here because this is what I'm using. It's like you can, again, Jupiter and Gemini, Mercury, and you can like jerk off to the idea that you have all this information and that you're learning more, but until the rubber meets the road, you don't really actually know anything. And so I just look at this kind of like this Wednesday of the moon conjoining Jupiter. There's all this access to information. It's almost overwhelming, but Mercury's retrograde and in detriment. Like, I just wonder how much of this is the moon conjoining Jupiter and Gemini, and there's too much information and you are confused and you are overwhelmed on where to go because you don't know what to say, you don't know what to listen to, versus the moon's conjoining Jupiter and Gemini. It's like that bus meme where the person's like looking at the dark thing and they think, versus the other person is looking at the sunrise, and it's really, and they're inspired. That's like what Wednesday is. And on one end, the depressed person is stuck in this information loophole of not getting the right answers, and this other person is like, I don't need the information, I just exist. And so then we get to Thursday. On Thursday, the moon, so Thursday's not as fun as Wednesday, I'll put it to you that way. The moon squares Saturn, squares Venus, squares Mercury, and then the moon goes into Cancer and squares Neptune. Thursday is a lot about hitting the brakes, I'll tell you that much. The moon, like the thing I wrote down is too much and everything just gets fucked. I don't like Thursday at all. Thursday, and it's so funny because look, we've had bad days in the astrology before, but this is just like the moon just like hits Saturn, hits Venus, hits Mercury, goes into Cancer, hits Neptune. It just seems like a lot of things get delayed. The moon in Gemini making a square to Saturn Pisces is like hitting a wall, hitting a big delay. Moon and Gemini squaring Venus retrograde in Pisces is like, have you ever has someone ever said something to you? Like, let's say you wore something, like you tried on a new outfit and someone said something to you that wasn't necessarily bad, but it made you like go, oh, I look dumb, I look retarded, and it kind of got you insecure. And then the moon in Gemini is squaring Mercury retrograde where you probably just misheard it. Like there's just a lot about Thursday that's just like, man, things are going slow. I hit a big wall. I don't feel good. I'm misinterpreting what everyone's saying, and everyone's misinterpreting what I'm saying. So Thursday's really frustrating, and then the moon goes into Cancer. So the moon going into Cancer is we now focus a little bit more on our necessities, on our priorities, things like that. But it squares Neptune. This is what's it. I'm looking forward to this only in the sense of I like a good challenge, and I like being challenged, even though like I don't like being challenged in the sense of whenever I'm challenged, I suck at things, but I like being challenged to be like, let me find out where else I suck at. But the moon going into Cancer, it's exalted, right? Or not exalted, it's in its domicile sign. So there's this comfortability, there's this like, look, the moon is our emotions, our body, how we feel. There's this part of it that's wanting to focus on necessity, but squaring Neptune and Aries, it's like, what is of necessity right now? What is mine to do? What am I supposed to be doing? What is the right action to take? And I would use Thursday when the moon goes into Cancer as a good proxy for when Jupiter goes into Cancer and squares Neptune and Aries. It's this, like when Jupiter in Cancer squares Neptune and Aries, it's very like, for example, like the whole like USAID thing, and people are like, oh my God, the government's not supporting people. You will see people bring their own resources together and their own communities. Just like, again, like, think about like the Lahaina fires, like the government like is like, here's $700, but then you saw actual people take care of actual people because you can't trust the government to do anything. But as the moon goes into Cancer and squares Neptune, there is this like, I want to protect, I want to provide, I want to nurture, but what do I do? And it reminds me of triage. I don't know much about this. My sister went to EMT school, and I think about this all the time. And I know like a little bit, but like triage is like, let's say there's a gigantic bus crash, and it's like there's like certain color systems to helping victims, and it's like, hey, you got a broken ankle, fuck off. Like you're gonna be fine. You're gonna sit over there. Someone's bleeding. Okay, they're like we need to probably stop the bleeding. Now someone's like, femoral arteries like cut open and they're bleeding everywhere and they're passed out. Like that's where you put all the attention to. So like the moon in Cancer squaring Neptune and Aries just reminds me of like triage in the sense of like, what are the priorities of things that we need to take care of? Like, where do we stop the bleeding? Does that make sense? And it could be really overwhelming if you don't have those systems in place. If you don't know what to do first or what to do next. And so I feel like that's what a lot of Thursday just feels like. So then we get to Friday, and Friday is the day that everything happens, okay? And so it's one of those things where, like, look, let me just list it off. Mercury is retrograde, and it will conjoin the North Node. That happens early in the morning. First highlight. Saturn makes its sextile to Uranus first. Then Mars makes its sextile to Uranus second. And then third, Mars makes a trine to Saturn. There's this, the thing that, like, look, each little tiny thing doesn't matter because they all kind of just insist upon themselves. But it's kind of just breakthrough after breakthrough. That's kind of the big thing. There's this, look, Saturn is about the systems and the structures and the discipline and the maturity that we have over like our spiritual part of ourselves. It's sextiling Uranus. We're going to have a couple more Saturn Uranus sextiles. In fact, I think is this the first one? I think this is the first Saturn Uranus sextile. We get one in Aries and Gemini, and then I think we do get another one in Pisces and in Taurus. But Saturn is structures, systems, discipline are being helped out by innovation, creativity, and sporadicness. So like Saturn sextiling Uranus is like, wow, we might develop some sort of system or structure in the way that we're doing things that just works out, right? Mars in Cancer is sextiling Uranus. This is our third time, right? Mars in Cancer is about like just putting out the like, again, letting the fire burn. You got to, and that was a lot of the Mars retrograde. I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, I haven't thought about Mars being retrograde in a while, and because it's not retrograde, but it's just like, I mean, it's still in Cancer, so it just doesn't feel that much different. Just doesn't feel as bad. But a lot like Mars now moving forward, still in shadow, is okay. I'm having to take care of these necessities. I'm able to fight these fires now. And as Mars sextiles Uranus, there's like, again, like all of a sudden the wind changes. All of a sudden the wind dies down, the temperatures cool down a little bit, so it's easier to fight these fires. And then Mars trines Saturn. It's like you have the right people with the right tools at the right place at the right time to get a lot of stuff done. That's what Friday is. And it's Mercury also too, being retrograde, conjoining the North Node. There is this very high sense of not being able to like again, you're not going to understand everything. You're not going to see, you're not going to understand everything. You're going to be confused. You're probably going to be a little bit overwhelmed, but it's one of those things of, it doesn't matter how the Amazon package gets to you. It just matters that the Amazon package gets to you. You don't have to know how all of this, how all the robots and the QR codes and whatever gets to you. It just gets to you. Supported action, innovation, and protection. And this is why Friday is why I called this week, like everything's coming together, because everything does come together on Friday, which I think is super exciting. So then we get to Saturday, and on Saturday, the moon, while it's in Cancer, will kind of follow up on everything that happened on Friday. It's going to sextile Uranus, it's going to trine Saturn, it's going to conjoin Mars, it's going to trine Venus, it's going to trine Mercury, and then it goes into Leo and trines Neptune. Now, Saturday kicks ass. I'm going to explain why. The moon, while it does all the things, right? Sextiles Uranus, trines Saturn, it conjoins Mars. I wrote down, it's like, it's good, but also frustrating. Like, look, things happen and, you know, you might be a little bit butthurt, but like, hey, it's kind of like, for example, like, have you ever had to fix something and you didn't really want to fix it, but it got fixed and now you're happy, but even though you're a little salty at like how much it cost, that's like what Saturday is. But then the moon trines Venus, trines Mercury. There's a lot of fun after this hardship. It's like, there's like a part of Saturday morning, it's like, oh, I got to get this done. And then you get to have your fun. But then the moon goes into Leo and trines Neptune. The thing I wrote down was like big heart eyes emoji, and there's glory from accomplishment. The moon going into Leo, like the moon is the unconscious in our body and how we feel, and it highlights what we may not see underneath the surface. And this is like the sun exalted in Aries. In fact, is this the day that the sun is at its exalted degree? No, not yet. That's next Monday. But the sun is like super, super exalted. The moon goes into Leo, where it's just reflecting that light, right? It's now like, wow, I am feeling very prideful. I do feel very accomplished. And it's trining Neptune in Aries. Like there's this, again, when I think about Neptune and Aries, I think about like the mythos about people who have conquered something. And there's this kind of like, wow, they did that. Wow, how are they able to do that? Like a mythos about their action, and like the moon and Leo trining that, like for your own personal sake, is like, I think highlighting that feeling of accomplishment, or that feeling of excitement, or that feeling like, yes, you did that, which is really exciting for Saturday night. Saturday night, fun time. And then we get to Sunday. The moon will go opposite Pluto, and then Venus, as our highlight, is going to make a retrograde, will still be retrograde and make a trine to Mars. Look, moon going opposite Pluto is like, it is amazing to me how many people in the year of 2025, where we understand and we know that you cannot make everyone happy, that you cannot please everybody, are still afraid of like crowds, and they're afraid of people and a bigger group of people's opinion about them. Like the moon in Leo after that trine to Neptune going opposite Pluto is very like, you need to use this energy to like face fears around other people. And you can't, like, the thing I wrote down was like, face those motherfuckers. People are going to hate you no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what you think, no matter what you believe, even if you think you're the best person. And even if you think, again, like a lot of you hate me and you still watch me, which is the funniest part, but you think you know, there's like this moral superiority to it. And there's nothing I could do that could fix or change that. People are going to hate what they hate. They're going to not like what they don't like. So there's a part of Sunday that's just kind of like having to face that for a moment. And then as the moon continues, you'll feel better. But then Venus, as she's retrograde, is going to make her trine to Mars. And this is like, our desires are finally aligned with our actions. That's really important to understand, because when Venus stationed retrograde, she was zodiacally squaring Mars, where Venus was like, our desires are detriment, and squaring Mars, our actions are fallen. Like there's this like, our actions and our values and are not aligned, versus they become aligned here. Like Venus trine to Mars, it's like what we want, what our desires are now like being supported by the actions that we could take. So there's this part of like just like tuning in on Sunday of like, oh shit, like I know what I want, and now I could take this action a lot more simply because I know what it is that I want. And that's Sunday. Next week is the big one. Next week is the big what do they say in Hawaii? I don't even know if they say this in Hawaii. But it's something, the big kahunga, the big something. Venus will conjoin Saturn. Mercury stations direct. Mercury conjoins the North Node. We have the full moon in Libra, and Venus stations direct next week. Those are all big ones. Next week is when everything starts to pivot, and we are now on the up and up. We're so back starting next week, and it will only continue as we go out through the rest of the year. So make sure you guys tune in if you to stay up to date with it, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next week.